A little beggar girl enters a luxury jewelry store, holding a necklace in her hands. She is anxious and very scared. She approaches the counter and asks the man on the other side, who was the owner of the jewelry store, "Sir, will you buy my necklace? I need money, please," begged the beggar girl to the respected millionaire of the city. He ignores the girl and tells her to leave the store. But when she opens the locket of the necklace, the millionaire sees an old photo and, upon realizing who was in the photo, he faints immediately. The rhythmic ticking of a precision Swiss timepiece echoed through the opulent jewelry store, each beat a hammer stroke against Armando Sterling's chest. At 59, his hands, calloused from handling precious metals, trembled imperceptibly as he adjusted a diamond necklace in the main display case. His distorted reflection in the glass showed a man with stooped shoulders, precisely combed grey hair, and eyes that carried the weariness of a decade of solitude. Sterling and Sons Jewelers, a name that had long lost its true meaning, shimmered under the halogen lights. Murano glass chandeliers hung from the soaring ceiling, casting rainbows that danced across the Claraara marble-clad walls. It was a temple of luxury, but for Armando, it had become a gilded cage where each displayed piece whispered painful memories of Helen, his beloved wife, who had passed away 10 long years ago. Mrs. Irene, his loyal employee with silver hair and a maternal smile, discreetly organized wedding bands, casting worried glances toward her boss. She had known Helen when she was young and vibrant, had witnessed the profound love that bound the couple, and now watched with sadness as Armando let himself be consumed by melancholy, transforming into a somber version of the man he once was. The chime above the door jingled softly, announcing the entrance of a figure that starkly contrasted with the opulent surroundings. A little girl, perhaps 6 years old, with a faded cotton dress and bare feet dusted with street grime, hesitated at the entrance. Her large, brown eyes, like polished antique coins, nervously scanned the glittering display cases before settling on Armando. Marina, though he didn't yet know her name, clutched a small, seemingly worthless object to her chest. Her tiny hands trembled, not just from the cold that seeped in through the half-open door, but from the desperation that had brought her there. The contrast was stark. The frail, frightened child amidst the splendor of precious stones that cost more than she could ever imagine in her short existence. "Mister," her voice came out as a choked whisper, "will you buy my necklace? I need a lot of money." Armando slowly raised his eyes, irritation showing on his austere face. Another panhandler, he thought bitterly. The city was teeming with children exploited by unscrupulous adults to tug at people's heartstrings. His fingers drummed impatiently on the mahogany counter as he watched the small figure who dared to interrupt his meticulously ordered routine. "Mrs. Irene," he called dryly, without taking his eyes off the girl, "please escort the child out." The employee approached gently, extending a hand to Marina. "Come, dear. Let's go outside." But there was something in the genuine despair of the child's eyes that made her hesitate. A maternal sixth sense warned her that this was no ordinary situation. Marina recoiled, clutching the object tighter to her chest. "Please, mister, my mommy is very sick. The doctor said she needs expensive medicine or else—" Her voice choked, tears welling up and running down her dirty cheeks. It was then that it happened. In a gesture of pure desperation, the little girl opened what she held in her hands, an old gold locket, simple but well preserved. Inside it, a small, time-yellowed photograph. Armando cast a casual glance, expecting to see the image of some unknown relative that would justify his polite but firm refusal. The world stopped. His breath caught in his throat as if someone had sucked all the air out of the jewelry store. The blood drained from his face, leaving him as pale as the marble walls. There, smiling eternally in that faded photo, was Helen. His Helen, young, radiant, exactly as she was when they first met 40 years ago, wearing the same floral dress from their first date. Armando's legs gave out. The marble floor rushed vertiginously toward him as everything darkened around. The last image he saw before fainting was Marina's frightened face, her wide eyes reflecting the same confusion that now dominated his shattered heart. The faint scent of rubbing alcohol and antiseptic slowly filtered into Armando's consciousness, mingling with Mrs. Irene's familiar lavender perfume. His eyes opened slowly, focusing first on the ornate ceiling of the jewelry store, then on the worried face of his employee who was leaning over him with a bottle of smelling salts in her hands. "Mr. Sterling, thank goodness, you gave us a terrible scare," Mrs. Irene murmured, helping him sit up on the cool floor. "And stay still, don't get up yet." The memory returned like an avalanche, the locket, the photo. Helen smiling through the years, as if time had not passed. Armando frantically turned his head, looking for the girl, and found her huddled next to the main counter, the locket still open in her small, trembling hands. Marina watched the strange man with a mixture of fear and genuine concern. "The photo," Armando whispered hoarsely, extending a trembling hand toward the locket. "Where did you get that photo?" Marina wiped her tears with the back of her hand, leaving clean streaks on her dirty cheeks. "It was Grandma Helen's. Mommy said Grandma was very pretty and very kind." Her childish voice carried a touching reverence when speaking of the grandmother she had never known. The name hit Armando like a second blow. Helen. His Helen had been a grandmother. That meant Clara, his daughter, Clara, who had left home almost a decade ago after a bitter argument, was alive, and she had a daughter. His granddaughter was here before him, asking for help with the same courageous determination he recognized in Clara's own temperament. "Your mother?" Armando tried to control the tremor in his voice. "What's her name?" "Clara," Marina replied simply. "Clara Marina Sterling. Mommy is very sick. Dr. Blackwood said she needs very expensive medicine, or else she's going to—" The child couldn't finish the sentence, fear strangling her words. Mrs. Irene watched the scene with growing comprehension. She knew the story of the fight between Armando and Clara, had witnessed her boss's silent pain all these years. Discreetly, she waved away the other employees, creating a private space for that extraordinary moment. Armando managed to stand, his legs still shaky. He approached Marina, kneeling to be at the girl's eye level. Up close, he could clearly see the familiar features. The shape of her face was Clara's, but the eyes, those expressive eyes, were exactly like Helen's when she was young. "Marina," he said softly, trying the name on his lips. "Where is your mother now?" "At home. She hasn't been able to get out of bed for many days. Our neighbor, Mrs. Davies, is looking after her while I went out to try and get money." Marina carefully closed the locket. "Mommy doesn't know I took her necklace. She'll be mad, but I didn't know what else to do." Armando's heart broke imagining Clara sick, alone, struggling to survive in conditions he couldn't even visualize. The proud daughter who had once declared she'd rather suffer than accept his help was now in a desperate situation, dependent on the courage of a 6-year-old child. "How much did the doctor say you need?" he asked, already mentally calculating how much money he had immediately available. $15,000, Marina replied with the precision of someone who had memorized every penny needed. "For the first treatment, then she'll need more." Armando swallowed hard. It was a lot of money, but it wasn't even a tenth of what he moved monthly in the jewelry store. For him, it would just be another check. For Clara and Marina, It meant the difference between life and death. "Mrs. Irene," he called, his voice now firm and decided. "Prepare $15,000 from the safe, in cash." "Mr. Sterling." The employee hesitated, concerned about the impulsiveness of the decision. "Do it, please," he repeated, then turned to Marina. "You're going to take me to your mother. Now." Marina blinked in surprise. You're really going to help?" "I'm going to help," Armando confirmed, feeling something awaken in his chest after years of numbness. "But first I need to see Clara. I need to know how she is." The girl nodded vigorously, a timid smile illuminating her face for the first time since she had entered the jewelry store. While Mrs. Irene prepared the money, Armando watched Marina carefully tucking the locket into a small cloth pouch tied around her waist. In that simple gesture, he saw Helen again, the same delicacy, the same care for things that truly mattered, the same silent strength that had captivated him decades ago and that now resurfaced through the great-granddaughter she had never met. Fate, Armando thought, had mysterious ways of correcting the mistakes of the past. The taxi wound its way through the increasingly narrow streets of the city's neglected districts, leaving behind the elegant buildings of downtown. Armando watched from the window as the urban landscape gradually transformed. Sophisticated boutiques gave way to small convenience stores, wide sidewalks narrowed, and smooth asphalt yielded to uneven cobblestone. Marina, sitting beside him, pointed directions with the familiarity of someone who knew every corner of that labyrinth of alleys. "It's right there, mister," she said, indicating a low, yellow brick house with small, rust-barred windows and a faded blue door. The driver hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the neighborhood, but Armando instructed him to stop. As he stepped out of the vehicle, he was hit by a mix of odors, food being cooked, laundry drying on lines, and something more subtle, the raw, honest scent of dignified struggle, of lives lived on the edge, yet refusing to break. Marina guided him through a narrow corridor that led to the back of the property, where the rented rooms were located. Her bare feet knew every loose stone, every hole to be avoided. Armando tried not to show the shock he felt, seeing where his daughter had come to live. "Mrs. Davies," Marina called softly, knocking on the neighbor's door. "I brought a gentleman to see Mommy." A middle-aged black woman, her hair wrapped in a colorful scarf and her apron stained, appeared at the door. Her sharp eyes scrutinized Armando from head to toe, taking in his expensive suit, gold watch, and Italian leather shoes. Her expression was a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "Who are you, sir?" she asked directly, placing herself protectively between Armando and the bedroom door where Clara rested. I'm Clara's father," Armando replied, his voice choked with emotion. "We haven't seen each other in a long time." Mrs. Davies frowned. Her father. Clara never spoke of any father. She always said she had no family. "We had a fight," Armando admitted with difficulty. "A terrible fight. But now, Marina came to me, and I came to help." The neighbor looked at Marina, who confirmed with a nod of her head. "It's true, Mrs. Davies. He's going to help Mommy get well." Still reluctant, Mrs. Davies opened the door. "She's very weak. Don't agitate her. You hear?" The room was small, perhaps 10 square feet, with a single bed pushed against the wall, a plastic side table, 2 chairs, and a plywood wardrobe. The tiny window let in a beam of golden light that illuminated the fragile figure lying on the bed. Clara was unrecognizable. The robust, determined young woman who had once confronted her father with harsh words had transformed into a gaunt woman, her dark hair matted to her face, sweating from fever. Her eyes, once bright with indignation, now seemed glazed over, lost somewhere between consciousness and delirium. Clara?" Armando whispered, approaching the bed slowly. "My daughter." Her eyes moved slowly, trying to focus on the face bending over her. For a moment, there was only confusion, as if she couldn't process the presence of that figure from the past. Then, gradually, recognition set in. "Father." Her voice came out as a thread of air. "No, it can't be. It's me, Clara. I came as soon as I heard you were sick." Tears began to stream down Clara's pale cheeks. "You shouldn't be here. I said terrible things." "Shh." Armando gently held his daughter's skeletal hand. "That doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you get well." Marina approached the bed, taking her mother's other hand. "Mommy, Grandpa is going to pay for the medicine. Dr. Blackwood said you're going to get well." Clara tried to sit up, but weakness overcame her. "No, I can't accept, not after everything." "You can, and you will accept," Armando said firmly, but without harshness. "For Marina, for you, for all the years we lost." Mrs. Davies watched the scene, moved, wiping her eyes with the corner of her apron. "That girl has been praying every blessed day for a miracle to happen. I think her prayers have been answered." Armando looked around the room, noticing Marina's drawings taped to the wall, some makeshift toys, a cloth with food scraps on the side table. It was a home built with love, but marked by deprivation. "We're getting out of here," he said softly. "I'm taking you to a better place, where Clara can get proper treatment." "No," Clara murmured with a remnant of stubbornness. "I won't be a burden to you again." "You were never a burden," Armando replied, feeling the weight of a decade of misunderstandings. "I was just too proud a father to understand what truly mattered." Marina held both their hands, joining them. "Grandpa, Mommy, you can't fight anymore. I need both of you." At that moment, in the tiny, stuffy room, something healed in Armando's heart. It wouldn't be easy, and there was still much to resolve, but his family was reunited again. Dr. Henry Blackwood arrived 2 hours later, preceded by the sound of his leather shoes echoing in the narrow corridor. He was a man of medium height, with a neatly trimmed grey beard and small eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. His black leather briefcase and impeccable white lab coat contrasted with the humble surroundings, creating an aura of authority that he clearly cultivated. "So, Clara," he said upon entering, barely noticing Armando's presence, "how are you feeling today?" "I hope you haven't been too agitated." Marina ran to hide behind her grandfather, intimidated by the doctor's imposing presence. Clara tried to straighten up in bed, clearly uncomfortable. "Doctor, this is my father," she said weakly. He wants to help with the treatment." Dr. Blackwood finally turned his attention to Armando, his eyes narrowing slightly as he assessed the well-dressed man. A cold smile appeared on his lips, the smile of someone who had just found a richer source of resources. "Ah, what a pleasant surprise," he said, extending a hand that Armando shook without enthusiasm. "Dr. Henry Blackwood, specialist in rare diseases. Your daughter has a very serious condition, Mr. Armando Sterling. What kind of condition?" The doctor opened his briefcase with theatrical movements, pulling out various vials of medicine and an expensive stethoscope. "A very rare degenerative neurological syndrome without adequate treatment. Clara has at most a few weeks." Armando felt a chill down his spine. "A few weeks? Unfortunately, yes. But fortunately for Clara, I've developed an experimental protocol that has shown promising results." Dr. Blackwood paused dramatically. "Of course, it's an expensive treatment." "Very expensive. How much?" Armando asked directly. "For the first phase, $15,000. But the full treatment, well, we're talking about at least $50,000 over the next few months." Mrs. Davies, who was watching from the doorway, made an expression of disbelief. It was more money than she saw in years of work. "And if this specific treatment isn't done?" Armando questioned, something in the doctor's tone bothering him. "Certain death," Dr. Blackwood replied dryly, beginning to examine Clara with abrupt gestures. "Clara, open your mouth, breathe deeply. Yes, the deterioration is accelerating. We need to start the next phase immediately." Clara moaned in pain. When the doctor pressed a certain point on her abdomen, Marina clung tighter to Armando's pants, her small fists trembling. "Doctor," Armando interjected, "would a second opinion be possible? Perhaps a specialist at a county hospital?" Dr. Blackwood straightened abruptly, his face taking on an offended expression. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, if you wanted your daughter to die, you'd just take her to a county hospital. They have neither the knowledge nor the resources to treat such a specific condition. But a second opinion never hurts." "It does!" the doctor exploded, then controlled his tone. "Any interruption to the protocol I've established can be fatal. Clara is in a critical phase. Every day lost is a day less of life." Clara tried to speak, but a violent cough interrupted her. Dr. Blackwood immediately prepared a syringe with a clear liquid. "This is the Phase 2 medication," he explained, giving the injection into Clara's skeletal arm. "It was expensive to import from Switzerland, but it's our only hope." Armando watched carefully. Something about the doctor's behavior didn't seem right. The constant pressure, the refusal to accept a second opinion, the insistence on exclusive methods. It reminded him of dishonest salespeople he had encountered in the jewelry business, people who exploited the desperation of others. "Doctor, could you give me a copy of Clara's lab results? I'd like to keep them for my records." Of course, Dr. Blackwood replied too quickly. But the more specific tests are still being processed in the lab. Very advanced technology, you understand. In a few days, I can provide everything." Marina discreetly tugged on Armando's pant leg. When he bent down, she whispered in his ear, "Grandpa, the doctor always says the tests are still being processed. It's been a long time." Dr. Blackwood, who didn't hear the child's comment, put away his instruments. "Well, Clara seems stable for today, but I'll need to return tomorrow for the next application. And Mr. Sterling," he looked Armando directly in the eye, "I hope you understand the urgency of the situation. Every day of payment delay is a day of risk for your daughter." After the doctor left, the room fell silent. Clara had fallen asleep after the medication, and Marina sat in a small chair, swinging her legs nervously. "Mrs. Davies," Armando called softly. How long has this doctor been treating Clara?" "About 2 months. She got much worse after he started coming." A seed of doubt began to sprout in Armando's mind. Something was very wrong, and he was determined to find out what. The next morning brought with it an episode that made Armando's heart race uncontrollably. He had returned early to the room, bringing fresh fruit and a digital thermometer, when he found Marina sitting on the floor, playing with something small and shiny. "What's that, sweetie?" he asked, kneeling beside his granddaughter. Marina held up an empty glass vial, the size of a thimble. "I found it in the trash outside. The doctor threw it away yesterday. I thought I could use it to keep water for my dolls." Armando examined the vial carefully. There were still some traces of a clear liquid at the bottom and a partially peeled label with words in another language. It didn't seem to be the same imported from Switzerland medication Dr. Blackwood had applied to Clara. "Marina, did you see the doctor throw away more vials like this?" "Uh-huh," she confirmed, nodding her head. "He always throws away different little vials. Sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're clear, but he always tells Mommy it's the same medicine. A cold sensation ran down Armando's spine. Different medications being described as the same treatment. That made no sense at all. Clara woke at that moment, coughing faintly. Her skin was even paler than the day before, and her hands trembled uncontrollably. "Good morning, daughter. How are you feeling?" "Worse," she admitted with difficulty. "Much worse. It's strange. When Dr. Blackwood started the treatment, I felt bad, but not like this. Now it's like something is consuming me from within." Armando approached the bed, noticing that Clara seemed to have lost even more weight. Her eyes were sunken, with dark circles that hadn't been there 2 days ago. "Clara, when did your symptoms start? Before or after you met Dr. Blackwood?" She frowned, trying to remember. I was feeling tired. Yes, it was hard to work at the salon. I felt dizzy, but it was manageable. It was after I started the treatment that what? That everything got much worse, very quickly. The doctor said it was normal, that the disease was progressing. At this moment, Mrs. Davies appeared at the door with a cup of hot tea. "Excuse me, but there's a woman outside who wants to speak with you, Mr. Sterling. She said it's very important." A woman of approximately 40 awaited in the small courtyard of the boarding house. She had brassy blonde hair, dressed in loud, garish clothes, and a nervous expression she couldn't hide. "Are you Clara's father?" she asked without preamble. "I am, and you are. I'm Mrs. Albright, the owner of this property." Her words tumbled out, as if she had rehearsed a speech. "I came to talk about the rent. Even if you're helping now, Clara is still 3 months behind." Armando frowned. 3 months? But Dr. Blackwood said the treatment started 2 months ago. The woman hesitated, realizing she had said something inconvenient. "Well, She was already having difficulties before that. How much does she owe?" $700, she replied quickly. "But there are also extra fees because of the special situation." "What special situation?" "Her illness might be contagious. I had to take special precautions, buy more expensive cleaning products, warn the other tenants." Mrs. Albright avoided looking directly at Armando. Something wasn't right. "Doctor, Blackwood had mentioned a degenerative neurological syndrome, not something contagious. Why would the landlady be worried about contagion? Mrs. Albright, who told you Clara's illness was contagious? It was the doctor who treats her. He explained that I needed to take special precautions." Armando took $1,000 from his wallet. "This covers the back rent and a few months in advance. But I want your word that Clara and Marina will not be bothered." The woman's eyes lit up at the sight of the money, but there was something else in her expression, relief mixed with guilt. After she left, Armando returned to the room where he found Marina drawing in an old notebook. The drawing showed simple figures, a woman in bed, a girl, and a man in a white lab coat with a very ugly face. "Marina, why did you draw the doctor with that face?" "Because he's mean," she replied without hesitation. "He makes Mommy cry, and whenever he comes, she gets sicker." The child's innocent observation hit Armando like a slap. A 6-year-old had noticed something that he, as an adult, was only beginning to suspect. That afternoon, while Clara slept after another medication applied by Dr. Blackwood, Armando made a decision. He carefully kept the vial Marina had found and mentally compiled a list of inconsistencies, different medications being described as the same, an illness that seemed to worsen with treatment, claims of contagion for a neurological syndrome, and the absolute refusal to allow a second opinion. It was time to investigate Dr. Henry Blackwood more thoroughly. His daughter was getting worse every day, and he had a growing feeling that the treatment itself might be the cause. Back at the jewelry store later that afternoon, Armando found Mrs. Irene meticulously organizing the pieces in the main display case. She worked with unusual concentration, as if trying to keep her hands busy to prevent her mind from wandering to greater concerns. "How is Clara?" she asked without looking up from the pearl necklace she was polishing. "Worse," Armando replied sincerely, sitting heavily in the chair behind the counter. "Much worse. And I'm starting to suspect that something isn't right with this doctor." Mrs. Irene finally looked at him, her hands stopping their repetitive motion. "What kind of thing?" Armando told her about the inconsistencies he had observed, the different medications, Clara's worsening condition, the contradictory claims about the illness. Mrs. Irene listened attentively, her experienced eyes catching nuances that a less attentive observer might miss. "Mr. Sterling," she said slowly, "may I take a look at the locket the girl brought?" Confused, but trusting his employee's instinct, Armando took the locket from his pocket. Mrs. Irene examined it under the lamplight, turning it carefully and using a small loop she kept for examining gemstones. "I knew it," she murmured, a sad smile crossing her face. I knew there was something special about this locket. What did you find?" "Look here." She pointed to an almost imperceptible area on the back of the locket. "There's a small engraving, very subtle, almost faded by time." Armando took the loop and examined where she indicated. There were indeed tiny letters engraved in the gold. H.S. plus A.S. Eternal Love, 1985. "Helen Sterling and Armando Sterling," Mrs. Irene said softly. "Oh, your wife showed me this engraving once, shortly before she died. She said it was proof that true love leaves marks that time cannot erase." Armando felt his eyes well up. Helen had secretly engraved those initials, like a message that would only be discovered by someone who truly paid attention to details. "But there's more," Mrs. Irene continued. "Helen told me something about Clara back then. She was worried about her daughter." "Worried how?" "Clara was always very sensitive to medication. Since she was little, she'd had adverse reactions to almost everything. Helen told me that even a simple antibiotic could make Clara very sick. That was one of the reasons she always preferred natural treatments." Armando straightened in his chair. "Sensitive to medication, Mrs. Irene. Clara is taking several different substances every day, and that could explain why she's getting worse instead of better," the employee concluded, "especially if the doctor didn't know about that sensitivity. Or if he knew and didn't care," Armando murmured somberly. Mrs. Irene hesitated before speaking again. "Mr. Sterling, may I make a suggestion?" "Of course. Many years ago, when you first started the jewelry store, there was a regular customer here. A retired doctor, Dr. Edward Hayes. He was a specialist in difficult diagnoses. Your wife Helen was very fond of him." Armando frowned, trying to remember. "Dr. Hayes? The name sounds familiar." "He stopped coming after the incident." "What incident?" Mrs. Irene sighed deeply. "You invested his retirement money in a business venture that went south. The losses were significant. He became very bitter and never wanted to speak to you again." The memory returned like a slap. Dr. Edward Hayes, an upright man who had trusted him with a diamond investment that turned out to be an elaborate fraud. Armando had managed to recover some of the money, but not all. The doctor had lost a considerable sum and, justifiably, had cut ties with him. "Where is he now?" "I heard he moved to a small town in the countryside. He'd become a recluse, somewhat embittered by life. But Mr. Sterling, if anyone can give an honest second opinion on Clara's case, it's him." Armando ran his hands through his grey hair. Seeking out Dr. Hayes would mean swallowing his pride. admitting past mistakes and possibly being rejected, but if it could save Clara, would you know how to find him? I can try. I still keep in touch with the wife of an old partner of his. At that moment, the jewelry store phone rang. Armando answered and heard Mrs. Davies's trembling voice on the other end of the line. "Mr. Sterling, come quickly. Clara is very ill. She started having seizures after the doctor left today. Her temperature is very high and she doesn't respond when we call her name." Armando's blood ran cold. "Call an ambulance. I'm on my way." As he rushed out of the jewelry store, an absolute certainty crystallized in his mind. Dr. Blackwood was not treating Clara. He was slowly killing her, and Armando needed to act before it was too late. With each passing second, his daughter was getting closer to the point of no return, and he felt helpless against an enemy who used trust and desperation as weapons. The county hospital was overflowing, but Armando managed to get Clara admitted quickly by mentioning he would pay for a private room. The attending physicians stabilized her, controlling the seizures with intravenous medication. But the diagnosis was alarming: signs of severe intoxication from unknown substances. "Sir, your daughter shows symptoms consistent with progressive poisoning," explained Dr. Santos, a young woman with glasses who had examined Clara thoroughly. "We need to know exactly what medications she's been taking." Armando handed over the vials he had managed to gather from Clara's room. The doctor examined them with growing concern. "These substances, some shouldn't even be available on the American market, and certainly not for the type of treatment that was described to you." It was at that moment that Marina, who had remained silent in a corner of the room, timidly approached the doctor. "Doctor, I kept some papers the bad doctor dropped." She pulled some crumpled papers from her small cloth pouch. Armando recognized Dr. Blackwood's handwriting, but the notes were in codes he didn't understand. "Doctor." Santos read the papers and visibly paled. "My God, these are notes on experimental dosages, and this name here," she pointed to a signature in the corner. "This doctor had his license revoked 5 years ago for illegal human trials on patients." "Dr. Henry Blackwood had his license revoked?" Armando asked, feeling the ground collapse beneath his feet. "Yes. He was testing experimental drugs on impoverished patients, claiming they were revolutionary treatments. Several people died." The doctor paused, looking at Clara unconscious on the bed. "Your daughter was a victim of a dangerous charlatan." Armando felt a murderous fury rise from his stomach to his throat. That man had used Clara's desperation, Marina's innocence, and his own paternal love to finance cruel experiments. His daughter was dying not from a rare disease, but from deliberate poisoning. "Will she survive?" he asked, his voice choked. "We'll do everything we can, but Mr. Sterling, some of these substances cause irreversible damage. We need a toxicology specialist to evaluate exactly what was administered." At that moment, Mrs. Irene appeared at the room's doorway, breathless from running through the hospital corridors. "Mr. Sterling, I found him. I found Dr. Hayes." "Where is he?" "In a town called Green Valley, 3 hours from here. I spoke with the wife of his old partner. She said he still treats some people in the community, but he's very embittered. I don't know if he'll want to help." Armando looked at Clara, pale and fragile in the hospital bed, then at Marina, who held her mother's hand with tears streaming down her face. The decision crystallized in his mind with absolute clarity. "Mrs. Irene, I want you to stay here with Clara and Marina. Don't let Dr. Blackwood get near them for a second. If he appears, call security immediately." "Where are you going?" "To find Dr. Hayes, even if I have to crawl at his feet and beg for forgiveness." The trip to Green Valley was the longest of Armando's life. With every mile, He thought of his daughter fighting the poison in her veins, of his granddaughter who might become an orphan, and of the stupid pride that had ruined so many relationships over the years. Green Valley was a picturesque town nestled among mountains, with cobblestone streets and colonial houses. Dr. Hayes's house was at the end of a quiet street, surrounded by a wild garden that had once been meticulously cared for. Armando knocked on the heavy wooden door, his heart pounding. Slow footsteps approached from the other side, and the door opened, revealing a man with completely white hair, an unkempt beard, and eyes that were once kind, but now carried the harshness of disillusionment. Dr. Edward Hayes. The doctor recognized him immediately, his face contorted into an expression of deep disgust. "Armando Sterling," he said coldly. "After 15 years, you have the audacity to appear at my door." "Doctor, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but you certainly don't." Dr. Hayes began to close the door. "It's about my daughter," Armando cried desperately. "She's dying, poisoned by a charlatan. My 6-year-old granddaughter could become an orphan. Please, I beg you." The door stopped closing. The doctor observed the genuine desperation on Armando's face, the same look of panic he had seen in hundreds of desperate parents throughout his career. "Your daughter, Clara. You remember her?" "Of course, I remember her. Helen always spoke of her with so much pride." Dr. Hayes paused, a shadow of pain crossing his face. "Helen was one of the few people who defended me when you ruined my retirement." Armando swallowed hard. "Doctor, I know I made terrible mistakes. I destroyed your trust, caused financial losses I can never fully repair, but Clara is innocent. She needs you." Dr. Hayes remained silent for long moments, observing the broken man at his door. Finally, he sighed deeply. "Come in, but I want to hear everything without omitting a single detail." Dr. Hayes's living room was a reflection of the man he had become. Antique furniture covered with sheets, medical books stacked in every corner, and a general sense of abandonment that spoke of shattered dreams and betrayed trust. Armando sat on a worn armchair, watching the doctor prepare coffee with mechanical movements. "Tell me everything," Dr. Hayes said, serving 2 cups of strong coffee that smelled of solitude. Armando narrated the events of the past few weeks: Marina's appearance at the jewelry store, the reunion with Clara, the growing suspicions about Dr. Blackwood, and finally the revelation that the doctor was a dangerous charlatan. Throughout the account, Dr. Hayes remained silent, occasionally making notes in an old notebook. "The substances you described," the doctor finally said, "some of them are derivatives of obsolete psychiatric medications. In small doses, they cause dependency. In larger doses," he didn't finish the sentence. "They cause what? Death by multiple organ failure, but slowly, allowing the perpetrator to continue charging for the treatment." Armando clenched his fists, trying to control his rage. "That bastard was slowly killing my daughter to make money. And he probably did it to many others." Dr. Hayes stood up, walking to a dusty bookshelf. "Armando, I need you to understand something. Even if I agree to help Clara, the damage already done may be irreversible. But there's a chance. There's always a chance. But it will be a long, expensive process, with no guarantees." The doctor paused, looking at an old photograph on the shelf. "And that brings me back to the central question: why should I help you?" The question hung in the air like a suspended blade. Armando knew this was the moment of truth, where he would have to confront not only the mistakes of the past, but the person he had become over the years. "Because you wouldn't be helping me," he replied slowly. "You'd be helping an innocent 6-year-old child who might lose her mother. You'd be honoring Helen's memory, who always believed in the goodness of people. Helen Dr. Hayes murmured, touching the photograph. She came to see me after you lost my money. Did you know that? Armando shook his head negatively. She cried in front of me, not for the financial loss, but because she knew it would destroy our friendship. Helen told me you were destroying yourself with your obsession with success, losing sight of what truly mattered. The words cut Armando like razors. She never told me that, because she loved you too much to wound your pride. But she knew you were becoming a person she didn't recognize. The doctor turned to face him directly. Do you remember the last conversation we had, Armando? I don't want to remember. I said that money wasn't the most important thing, that our friendship was worth more than any investment, and you replied that feelings didn't pay the bills. The memory returned with full force. Dr. Hayes's office, 15 years ago. The doctor trying to be understanding while Armando defended himself with calculated coldness, refusing to accept emotional responsibility for what had happened. I was wrong, Armando said, his voice choked. Completely wrong. I was an arrogant man, obsessed with success, unable to admit my flaws. I lost you, I lost Clara, and I almost lost Helen too. If she hadn't died before I could push her away completely. And what has changed? Why should I believe you're different now? Armando thought of Marina, her large, frightened eyes in the jewelry store, the innocent trust with which she had handed over her grandmother's locket. He thought of Clara, fragile and poisoned, yet still trying to protect her father's wounded pride. He thought of Helen, whose love had transcended death itself to reunite a shattered family. Because, he said slowly, for the first time in decades, I understand that some things are more important than money. The family I built and destroyed, the legacy of love that Helen left, the possibility of Marina having a living mother and a grandfather who is worth something. Dr. Hayes observed the broken man before him, seeing not the arrogant businessman of years ago, but a desperate father who had finally found his priorities. Helen left something for you, he said suddenly, going to an old drawer. She asked me to deliver it if anything happened to her and you needed guidance. It was a letter in Helen's delicate handwriting. Armando opened it with trembling hands. My dearest Armando, if you are reading this, it means you have finally understood that love is the only true wealth. Clara needs you, but not your money. She needs the father I knew and loved. Be that man again. With eternal love, Helen. Tears streamed down Armando's aged face. The doctor watched in silence, recognizing the exact moment when pride finally surrendered to humility. Dr. Hayes, Armando said firmly, I cannot undo the past. I cannot return your lost money or the years of friendship I wasted. But if you give me this chance, I swear by Helen's memory that I will be a better man. The doctor sighed deeply, putting the photograph back on the shelf. Prepare the car. We're going to save Clara. The drive back to the hospital was a race against time, with Dr. Hayes carefully examining the vials and notes Armando had collected. His expression grew darker with each discovery. This scoundrel is more dangerous than I imagined, he murmured, adjusting his glasses to read a microscopic label. Some of these substances are derivatives of pesticides. Others are synthetic hormones that cause chemical dependency. He concocted a diabolical cocktail. But can Clara recover? If we act quickly, yes, but first, we need to neutralize the toxins in her body. This will be painful for her. They arrived at the hospital in the early evening. Armando ran through the corridors to Clara's room, finding Mrs. Irene sitting by the bed, holding Marina's hand, who was asleep in a small chair. Clara was conscious, but clearly debilitated. Father, she whispered when she saw him. Mrs. Irene told me about Dr. Blackwood. I'm so sorry, I was so naive. You are not to blame for anything, Armando replied, kissing her feverish forehead. I brought someone who will help you. Dr. Hayes entered the room, and Clara recognized him immediately. Dr. Hayes, you were Mommy's friend. I was, dear, and now I will take care of you as I would have taken care of her. The doctor approached the bed, examining Clara with the gentleness of someone who truly cared. Clara, I need to be honest. The treatment will be difficult. Your body is addicted to the substances that charlatan administered. There will be withdrawal symptoms. Marina woke at that moment, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Seeing Dr. Hayes, she hid behind Armando. Don't worry, little one, the doctor said gently. I'm not like the other doctor. I'm going to make your mommy truly well. You promise? Marina asked with the seriousness of a child who had seen adults break important promises. I promise I will do everything in my power. Dr. Hayes explained the procedure to the hospital medical team. It would require a controlled detoxification process followed by regenerative treatment that could take weeks. Dr. Santos, who had initially attended Clara, was impressed by the retired doctor's knowledge. Doctor Hayes, would it be possible for you to supervise the treatment? We've never seen such a complex case of poisoning. Of course, doctor, but there's one condition. I want Dr. Blackwood prevented from approaching this patient, and I want the authorities notified about his activities. It was then that Mrs. Albright appeared at the room's doorway, visibly nervous and accompanied by Dr. Blackwood. The charlatan carried his black briefcase and an expression of forced authority. What is the meaning of this? Dr. Blackwood asked sharply upon seeing Dr. Hayes. Who authorized another doctor's interference in my treatment? I authorized it, Armando replied, placing himself protectively between the charlatan and Clara's bed. And we discovered your lies. Dr. Blackwood, or should I say, ex-Dr. Blackwood. The man's face visibly paled. And I don't know what you're talking about. We know your license was revoked 5 years ago, Dr. Hayes said calmly. We know you were systematically poisoning Clara, and we have evidence of everything. Dr. Blackwood tried to maintain his composure, but his nervousness was evident. You are making a grave mistake. Clara has a very specific condition that only I know how to treat. Marina got up from the chair and ran to Armando. Grandpa, he's the bad man from my drawings. The child's innocence, pointing a finger at Dr. Blackwood, had a devastating effect. Mrs. Irene stood up, glaring at the charlatan with fiery eyes. You are a monster, she said, her voice trembling with anger. To use the desperation of a sick mother to conduct experiments, it's unforgivable. Mrs. Albright tried to slink out of the room, but Dr. Hayes intercepted her. You also played a part in this, didn't you? You were paid to facilitate his access to Clara. I didn't know he was harming her, the woman stammered. He said it was a special treatment. Liar! Marina cried with childish indignation. You always knew when the bad doctor was coming, and you always took his side when Mommy cried. Dr. Blackwood, realizing his charade had been utterly exposed, tried one last desperate move. You don't understand. Clara will die without my treatment. Only I have the antidote for the substances she has already received. More lies, Dr. Hayes said firmly. There is no antidote because there is no disease. There is only progressive poisoning that you caused. At that moment, 2 hospital security guards appeared at the door, called by Dr. Santos. Dr. Blackwood looked around, realizing he was cornered. This won't be over, he threatened, being escorted out. You will regret interfering with my work. Mrs. Albright followed him, murmuring apologies that no one wanted to hear. When the room finally fell silent, Clara began to cry, not from physical pain, but from relief and gratitude. Marina climbed onto the bed and hugged her mother, and Armando enveloped both in his arms. "Now," Dr. Hayes said softly, "let's begin the real treatment, the path to healing." The first few days of the real treatment were the most difficult the family had faced. Clara went through an intense period of detoxification, with symptoms ranging from uncontrollable tremors to hallucinations caused by the withdrawal of the addictive substances Dr. Blackwood had administered. Armando didn't leave his daughter's bedside for a moment. He held her hand during crises, wiped her sweat during fever, and whispered words of encouragement when she cried out in pain. It was as if he was trying to compensate for an entire decade of absence in just a few days. "Father," Clara murmured during one of the few hours she was lucid, "why did you stay?" "Because I learned that family is more important than pride," he replied, adjusting the pillow behind her head. "And because I love you more than I ever knew how to express." Marina had become the family's little nurse. She brought fresh water for her mother, organized the medications prescribed by Dr. Hayes with professional precision, and made colorful drawings to decorate the cold hospital room. In her most recent drawings, 3 smiling figures appeared, a woman in bed, but now with bright colors instead of dark tones, a man in a suit she had learned to call Grandpa, and a little girl surrounded by hearts. Dr. Hayes visited Clara twice a day, carefully monitoring every aspect of her recovery. He had brought an old briefcase from Green Valley filled with herbal remedies and techniques that modern medicine sometimes forgot in favor of more lucrative treatments. Clara was always sensitive to chemical medications, he explained to Armando during one of the consultations. "Helen told me that years ago. That's why I'm primarily using plant-based treatments and nutritional adjustments." "Is it working?" "Slowly, but yes. Her liver is regenerating. Her kidneys are returning to normal function, but her nervous system, that will take more time." Mrs. Irene had practically moved into the hospital. She alternated between caring for Marina and managing the jewelry store remotely, always with her phone close by in case Armando needed anything. Her devotion deeply touched her boss's heart. "Mrs. Irene," he said one afternoon when Clara was sleeping soundly, "why are you doing all this for us?" "Because Helen asked me to," she replied simply. "Before she died, she made me promise to look after you if you ever needed to find your way back home." My way back home. To the man she fell in love with. The man who put family above everything. Mrs. Irene smiled sadly. "She knew you were losing yourself, but she never lost hope that you would find your way back." Armando felt his eyes well up. "She was always wiser than I." During the second week, Clara had a significant relapse. Her body, still fighting toxic residues, developed a severe infection that left her unconscious for 3 days. Marina didn't understand why her mother wouldn't wake up, and Armando saw his own despair reflected in his granddaughter's frightened eyes. "Grandpa," she asked on the 3rd night, "is Mommy going to heaven like Grandma Helen?" The simple question broke Armando's heart. He picked Marina up, sitting in an armchair that had become his second home. "I don't know, little one. But what I do know is that we are fighting very hard for her to stay with us. Do you think Grandma Helen is helping?" Armando looked at the locket Marina now wore permanently around her neck, Helen's photo visible through the clear glass. "I think so. I think she never stopped looking out for us." It was that same night that Clara woke up. Her eyes were clearer than they had been in weeks, and when she saw Armando and Marina sleeping, embracing each other in the armchair beside her bed, a genuine smile illuminated her face for the first time since the ordeal began. "Father," she called softly. Armando woke immediately, almost disbelieving that Clara was awake and seemingly lucid. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Much better. Clara tried to sit up, managing for the first time in weeks. And hungry. Very hungry. Mrs. Irene, who had been dozing in a nearby chair, woke with the movement and rushed to inform Dr. Hayes. The doctor arrived in a few minutes, examining Clara with care. Her vital signs are stable, he announced with clear satisfaction. Her fever has completely broken and lucidity has returned. Clara, do you remember anything from the past few days? I remember Dad holding my hand. I remember Marina singing to me. And I remember dreaming of Mommy. Clara looked directly at Armando. In my dreams, she said our family was being healed. Marina woke at that moment, seeing her mother sitting up and talking. She screamed with joy, climbing onto the bed to hug Clara with all the strength of her small arms. Mommy, you're back! You're really back! Yes, my love, I'm back, and now we'll be together forever. Doctor. Hayes observed the reunited family and felt a deep satisfaction he hadn't experienced in years. This was what medicine should be, not just healing bodies, but restoring hope and reuniting families. I think, he said with a rare smile, that the worst is over. With Clara in full recovery, Dr. Hayes deemed it safe to transfer her to a more comfortable private room. The new environment, with wide windows letting in natural light and enough space for Marina to play, brought palpable relief to the entire family. It was in this more welcoming room that Armando finally found the courage to address the subject that had remained an open wound between him and Clara for decades. Daughter, he said one afternoon, while Marina slept on a cot beside them, I need to talk about our fight, about the terrible things we said to each other. Clara, now able to sit up unaided and with color returning to her face, sighed deeply. I also need to talk about it, Father. I carried so much resentment all these years. You were right about many things you said, Armando admitted, pulling the chair closer to the bed. I really had become obsessed with work. I was more interested in building a business empire than in understanding my own daughter's dreams. But I was also wrong, Clara replied, tears welling in her eyes. When I said I'd rather starve than accept your help. When I said you weren't a real father, those were cruel words. Why did you never reach out to me, Clara? Even when Marina was born, even when things got difficult. Clara wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hospital gown. Pride, Father. The same stubborn pride I inherited from you, and also fear. Fear of what? Fear that you would look at Marina and see just another financial responsibility. Fear that you would try to mold her the same way you tried to mold me. Clara paused, watching her daughter sleep. I wanted Marina to grow up free to be whoever she wanted to be. Armando felt the weight of that revelation. And you thought I wouldn't allow that? At the time, yes, you wanted me so badly to take over the jewelry business, to marry someone from our social circle, to follow the plan you had mapped out for my life. It never seemed to matter what I really wanted. And what did you really want? Clara smiled for the first time when speaking of the past. I wanted to paint. I wanted a small studio, to sell my paintings at art fairs, to teach art to children. Simple things, but they made me happy. Why did you never tell me that clearly? I tried, Father, many times. But you always changed the subject or said that hobbies didn't pay the bills. Clara looked directly at him. Just like what happened with Dr. Hayes when you lost your friendship. The comparison hit Armando like a punch. You're right. I had become a person who only saw value in financial terms. At that moment, Marina woke, stretching like a kitten. She observed the serious conversation between her mother and grandfather with the keen intuition of children. Are you fighting again? She asked with concern. "No, dear," Clara replied, extending her arms to her daughter. "We're talking about important things, about how families sometimes get lost and then find each other again." Marina climbed onto the bed, sitting between the two. "Like in my drawing." "What drawing?" The girl ran to her small backpack and pulled out a folded paper. It was a new drawing, different from the previous ones. It showed 3 figures holding hands, and above them, a smiling woman with wings. "This is Grandma Helen," Marina explained, pointing to the winged figure. "She's happy because our family is together now." Armando studied the drawing, noticing details a child shouldn't theoretically know. The winged woman wore a dress with the same floral pattern Helen wore in the locket photo, and held something that looked like a necklace. "Marina," he asked softly, "how do you know how Grandma Helen dressed?" "She tells me in my dreams," the girl replied naturally. "She said, 'You and Mommy needed to talk about the sad things to be happy again.'" Clara and Armando exchanged astonished glances. It was impossible for Marina to know the specific details of the argument they'd had years ago. Yet, somehow, her drawings and comments always seemed to reflect exactly what needed to be said. "Oh gee, what else did Grandma Helen tell you?" Clara asked, fascinated. "That Grandpa has a good heart, but he forgot about it for a while, and that you are strong like she was, but you also need to forgive." Marina paused, looking at them both seriously, "and that she left something special for when you two became friends again." "What kind of special thing?" "I don't know. She just said it was in a box with flowers." Armando frowned. A box with flowers. Suddenly, an old memory surfaced. Helen had a wooden box painted with flowers where she kept letters and small treasures. He hadn't seen that box since his wife's death. "Mrs. Irene!" he called when his employee entered the room bringing a snack for Marina. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Do you know where Helen's flower box is, the painted wooden one?" Mrs. Irene's face lit up. "Of course, it's in the jewelry store's storage. Helen asked me to keep it there when she got very sick. She said it would be important one day. Can you bring it here tomorrow?" "Of course." Clara observed the interaction with growing curiosity. "Father, what box is that?" "A box where your mother kept special things, things she found too important to be kept just anywhere." Armando held his daughter's hand. "Clara, I think your mother knew that one day we would need to find our way back to each other. And she left a map?" Marina asked, excited by the idea. "Maybe she did, little one. Maybe she left something even better." Mrs. Irene arrived at the hospital the next morning carrying a wooden box the size of a shoebox, hand-painted with delicate pastel flowers. The paint had faded with time, but it was still possible to see the artistic care with which Helen had decorated each petal, each leaf. "I dusted it off," Mrs. Irene explained, placing the box carefully on the bedside table. "But I didn't open it. Helen made me promise that only you or Clara could open it." Marina watched the box with wide eyes, as if she could feel the magic emanating from it. Clara, now able to sit in the armchair beside the bed, extended her trembling hands toward the object that held her mother's memories. "Father," she said softly, "I think we should open it together." Armando nodded, feeling his heart race. For more than 10 years, he had avoided touching Helen's personal belongings, unable to bear the pain of the memories. Now, with Clara and Marina by his side, he felt he finally had the strength to face whatever was kept inside. The box's clasp was simple, just a small golden latch. When Armando opened it, a subtle scent of lavender, Helen's favorite perfume, escaped, filling the room with her almost tangible presence. Inside the box, organized with the meticulous care that characterized Helen, were several objects: letters tied with blue ribbon, Small photographs, a leather-bound notebook, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, something that made Armando hold his breath. "They're letters," Clara observed, delicately picking up the tied bundle. "All addressed to you, Father." The letters had different dates, some from more than 15 years ago, others more recent. Armando opened the first with trembling hands. "My dearest Armando, today Clara said again that she wants to study art. I see her eyes light up when she talks about it, just as your eyes lit up when you told me about your dreams of having a family jewelry business. Please, don't let success make you forget the dreams of others. With love, Helen." "She was trying to bring us closer," Clara murmured, tears streaming down her face. "Even when I was rebellious and you were distant, she tried to build bridges." Armando read more letters aloud. Each was Helen's gentle attempt to make him understand his daughter, to explain Clara's fears, to suggest ways for them to connect. Some more recent letters revealed deeper concerns. Armando: "I'm sick. The doctors haven't said it yet, but I know. I'm afraid to leave you two without resolving this distance between you. Clara needs you, but she needs the compassionate father you are deep down, not the successful businessman you've become on the surface." "Mommy knew she was sick?" Clara asked, her voice choked. "It seems so," Armando replied, finding more letters that confirmed his suspicions. "And she was preparing this box as a way to help us after she was gone." Marina, who had remained silent, pointed to the leather notebook. "What's in there?" Armando opened the notebook and discovered it was filled with Clara's drawings, drawings Helen had secretly kept over the years. There were landscapes, portraits, still lifes, all executed with evident artistic talent. On the last page, Helen had written, "Armando, our daughter has an extraordinary gift." These drawings were made between the ages of 12 and 17, when she thought you had thrown them away. I kept them because I knew that one day you would need to see the world through her eyes. "Father," Clara whispered, you really threw my drawings away." "I thought they were just scribbles," Armando admitted, devastated. "I didn't know. I never really looked at them." "That's why I never drew again when I left home," Clara said, closing her eyes painfully. "I thought you had discarded them because they had no value." Finally, Armando unwrapped the object in the tissue paper. It was a small clay sculpture, clearly made by childish hands, representing a family of 3. On the base, it was engraved, "For Daddy, from Clara, 8 years old. You made this for me? For Father's Day. You were traveling for business, and when you came back, I was asleep. I left it on your desk. But the next day, it was gone." Clara delicately touched the small sculpture. "I thought you hadn't liked it." "I never saw this," Armando said, examining every detail of the small work of art. "It must have gotten lost among the office papers." At the bottom of the box, there was one last letter, more recent, dated just 2 months before Helen's death. "My loves, if you are reading this together, it means that love has finally conquered pride. Armando." "Clara is an artist as I always knew she would be. Support her dreams as you once supported mine. Clara, your father has an immense heart, but sometimes he gets lost trying to protect those he loves. Be patient with each other, and take care of my little granddaughter with all the love I wish I could have given her. You are my greatest work of art, an imperfect family, but full of love. Helen." The silence that followed was broken only by Clara's sobs and the gentle sound of Marina climbing into the armchair to hug her grandfather. Armando held the family he had almost lost, feeling the weight of all the wasted years, but also the lightness of a second chance. "Father," Clara said through tears, "I forgive you, and I hope you forgive me too." "I forgave you a long time ago," Armando replied, kissing his daughter's forehead. Now we need to forgive ourselves and move forward. Marina, always practical in her innocence, lifted her head and said, "So now we can be a real family." "Yes, little one," Armando smiled through tears. "Now we can be a real family." At that moment, in the hospital room fragrant with lavender and filled with rediscovered memories, 3 generations finally reunited, not just physically, but emotionally. Helen, through her posthumous wisdom, had achieved what seemed impossible, healing wounds that appeared incurable and reuniting hearts that pride had separated. 3 weeks after opening Helen's box, Clara was strong enough to be discharged from the hospital. Dr. Hayes had carefully monitored every aspect of her recovery, and the results were better than anyone had dared to hope. Clara's organs had almost completely regenerated, and her energy had gradually returned. But the true miracles were happening beyond the medical reports. The family had decided not to return to the miserable room in the boarding house. Armando had rented a spacious, well-lit apartment in a quiet neighborhood, where Clara would have space to set up a small studio and Marina could play safely. "Father," Clara said, as they organized the few belongings worth taking from their old dwelling, "I don't want you to think I'm interested in your money now. And I don't want you to think I'm trying to buy your love," Armando replied, carrying a box of paints and brushes he had bought for her. "I'm just trying to give the support I should have always given." Marina ran back and forth in the new apartment, amazed by the room that would be all hers, with a window overlooking a playground, with the kitchen where she could help her mother cook. To her, this wasn't luxury, it was simply a real home. Dr. Hayes visited Clara regularly, not just for medical consultations, but as the family friend he had become again. The reconciliation with Armando had given the doctor something he thought he had lost forever: the satisfaction of practicing medicine with genuine compassion. "Clara," he said during one of the consultations, "I'd like to make a proposal. I'm thinking of returning to practice, at least partially. How about we open a community clinic? You could coordinate art therapy activities for recovering patients." Clara's eyes lit up. "Art therapy? Your drawings during your recovery showed me how healing art can be. Many patients could benefit from that." It was the perfect opportunity. Clara could use her artistic talent professionally, helping others, while Dr. Hayes returned to medicine with renewed purpose. Meanwhile, justice finally caught up with Dr. Blackwood. The authorities, armed with the evidence collected by Dr. Hayes and Clara's testimonies, had built a solid case against the charlatan. Other victims began to come forward, encouraged by Clara's example. Mrs. Davies, Clara's former neighbor, was one of the main witnesses. "That man destroyed several families in the neighborhood," she declared to the authorities. "He always promised miraculous cures to desperate people." Mrs. Albright also faced consequences. Although not criminalized, she lost her license to operate the boarding house after an investigation revealed she facilitated illegal activities in exchange for payments. The building was sold, and honest tenants were relocated to better living conditions. "Grandpa," Marina asked one afternoon while drawing at her new small table in her room, "the bad doctor isn't coming back, is he?" "No, little one. He'll never be able to harm anyone again. And the bad lady either. Her too. Bad people had to pay for what they did." Marina nodded contentedly and returned to her drawing. Her artwork had evolved remarkably. Now she drew colorful landscapes, smiling animals, and always a happy family at the center of each composition. Clara was flourishing in ways that surprised even herself. In addition to collaborating with Dr. Hayes at the community clinic, she had begun selling her paintings at a small local gallery. Her works, influenced by the experience of overcoming adversity she had lived through, deeply touched those who saw them. "Father," she said one evening as they dined together, something that had become a sacred ritual in the family. "I want you to know that I am happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in years." "I am happy too," Armando replied, watching Marina carefully paint a landscape with watercolors, "happier than I ever imagined possible after losing your mother." "I think Mommy is happy too," Marina said without looking up from her painting. "She told me in my dreams that her family was complete now." Mrs. Irene, who had joined them for dinner, another new ritual, smiled with tears in her eyes. Helen always said that love finds a way. The jewelry store had also undergone transformations. Armando maintained the business, but now with a different perspective. He had created a program where part of the profits was donated to the community clinic, and he had hired 2 extra employees so he could spend more time with his family. "You know," he said to Mrs. Irene one quiet morning at the store, "I never thought money could buy happiness. But I also never imagined that true wealth had nothing to do with money." "You learned what Helen always tried to teach you," she replied, carefully polishing a pearl necklace, "that the most precious jewels are the relationships we cultivate." Dr. Hayes had permanently settled in the town, dividing his time between the community clinic and private consultations. The renewed friendship with Armando had given the doctor back his passion for the profession and his trust in human kindness. "Armando," he said during a lunch at the family's apartment, "I want to thank you for giving me the chance to forgive and be forgiven. These past few months have taught me that it's never too late to start over." "Thank you for saving my daughter," Armando replied, watching Clara teach Marina to mix colors on a palette. "In every possible sense." As the weeks passed, the family's routine settled around small rituals of love: breakfast together before Armando went to the jewelry store, afternoons when Clara painted while Marina played or drew beside her, dinners where they talked about the day's events, and nights when they read stories before Marina slept. Marina had enrolled in a nearby school and was making friends for the first time. Her teachers commented on her exceptional intelligence and precocious artistic ability, but mostly on her ability to spread joy wherever she went. "She has something special," the teacher commented to Clara during a meeting, "an inner light that touches everyone around her." "She inherited that from her great-grandmother," Clara replied, instinctively touching the locket she now wore around her neck, having received it from Marina in a spontaneous gesture of love. The house became a home in the true sense of the word, the walls filled with Clara's paintings and Marina's drawings. The kitchen always smelled of home-cooked meals. Laughter echoed through the hallways, and every night, before going to sleep, Armando looked at Helen's photo on the bedside table and whispered, "Thank you for showing us the way back home." 6 months had passed since that fateful morning when Marina entered the jewelry store with Helen's locket. Now, on a golden spring afternoon, the family prepared for a special event, the official inauguration of the Helen Sterling Community Clinic, a dream that had been born from the union of Dr. Hayes's medical wisdom and Clara's artistic vision. Armando adjusted his tie in front of the bedroom mirror, observing his own reflection with surprise. The somber, melancholic man who avoided his own reflection had given way to someone with bright eyes and a genuine smile. The wrinkles of worry were replaced by expression lines that spoke of shared laughter and moments of joy. "Grandpa, you look so handsome," Marina exclaimed, appearing at the door wearing a new blue dress with Helen's locket gleaming around her neck. At a full 7 years old, they had celebrated her birthday with a party that gathered all the friends the family had made. She radiated the same vivacity Helen possessed in the old photographs. "Thank you, Princess. And you look beautiful as always." Clara appeared next, wearing an elegant yet comfortable outfit, carrying a folder with materials for her art therapy program presentation. Her transformation was perhaps the most impressive of all. From a woman devastated by illness and poverty, she had become a respected artist and a dedicated therapist, radiating a serenity that came from having found her true purpose. "Are you ready?" she asked, but her question was rhetorical. Everyone knew that this day represented much more than the inauguration of a clinic. It was the celebration of a family that had risen from the ashes of its own wounds. The inauguration ceremony was held in the clinic's main hall, a spacious and luminous area that Clara had helped decorate. The walls displayed a harmonious mix of medical information and artworks, some by Clara, others by patients who had already benefited from the pilot art therapy program. Dr. Hayes, now with a renewed vitality that made him look 10 years younger, addressed the attendees with the eloquence of someone who had rediscovered his professional passion. "This clinic represents more than a new medical venture," he said, observing Armando, Clara, and Marina in the front row. "It represents proof that true healing happens when we combine science, art, and unconditional love." Clara was invited to speak about the art therapy program. Her voice, once fragile and hesitant, now sounded clear and confident as she explained how artistic expression could accelerate healing processes and help patients process trauma and illness. "Art," she said, "has the power to transform pain into beauty, fear into hope, and isolation into connection. Every brushstroke, every drawing, every chosen color is a step on the journey back to a full life." Marina, sitting beside her grandfather, drew discreetly in a small notebook she always carried. Her drawing showed the clinic surrounded by colorful flowers, with smiling people entering and leaving, and in the sky, a female figure with wings observing everything with approval. After the official ceremony, there was a reception in the clinic garden. Mrs. Irene, now officially retired but remaining as Armando's special consultant, circulated among the guests with the pride of a grandmother showing off her grandchildren. "Mr. Sterling has always been a good man," she would say to anyone who would listen. "He just needed to learn to look in the right place to find true wealth." Dr. Hayes approached Armando during the reception, carrying 2 glasses of grape juice. Both had chosen not to drink alcohol, preferring to keep their minds clear for every precious moment of life. "Armando," he said, "I want you to know that these past few months have given me back something I thought I had lost forever." "What?" "Faith in humanity, the ability to forgive, the joy of making a difference in people's lives." The doctor paused, observing Clara demonstrating painting techniques to a group of interested people. "Your daughter is extraordinary. Helen would be proud." "I keep thinking," Armando reflected, "how different things would be if I'd listened to Helen from the beginning, if I had supported Clara's dreams instead of imposing my own." "We can't change the past," Dr. Hayes replied wisely, "but we can honor it by building a better future." Marina ran to them at that moment, holding her drawing notebook. "Grandpa, Dr. Edward, I made a special drawing." The drawing showed 2 male figures, one representing Armando, the other Dr. Hayes, shaking hands under a rainbow. Above them, written in a 7-year-old's whimsical handwriting, was "Friends Forever." "It's beautiful, Marina," Dr. Hayes said, kneeling to be at the girl's height. "Can I keep it?" "Of course. I made it especially for you because you saved Mommy and brought Grandpa back home." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in golden and rosy hues, the family prepared to return home. The apartment they had transformed into a home awaited them with promises of quiet dinners, conversations by the fireplace, and the continuation of the routine they had built with so much care. In the car, Marina fell asleep in the back seat. clutching a new doll Dr. Hayes had given her as a gift for the clinic's inauguration. Clara drove serenely, occasionally exchanging loving glances with Armando in the passenger seat. "Father," she said softly, "do you think we managed to honor Mommy's memory?" Armando watched Marina, sleeping peacefully in the rearview mirror, then looked at Clara, seeing in her not just his daughter, but a strong and accomplished woman who had overcome unimaginable adversities. "I think we did more than that," he replied. "I think we proved that the love she planted in us was too strong to be destroyed by time, by pride, or by hardship." That night, after Marina was put to bed and Clara retired to her studio to work on a new painting inspired by the special day, Armando sat in his favorite armchair in the living room. The house was silent, but it was a silence filled with peace, not loneliness. He took the locket from his pocket that Marina had insisted he keep for a few days. She said Grandma Helen wanted to talk to him. He opened it carefully, observing once again the young, radiant face of his wife, who had been his source of strength for so many years. "Helen," he whispered to the photograph, "our girl grew up and became an extraordinary woman. Our granddaughter is a little artist full of light, just like you. And I finally learned to see what you always tried to show me." A soft breeze entered through the open window, making the curtains dance gently. For a moment, Armando swore he felt the scent of lavender in the air and a warm presence beside him. He closed the locket carefully and placed it on the coffee table next to a recent family photograph. Himself, Clara, and Marina smiling in the park, with Dr. Hayes and Mrs. Irene rounding out the group that had become his true family. Marina had painted a colorful frame around the photograph, and underneath, in her still childish but determined handwriting, she had written, "My family of the heart." Armando smiled, feeling a deep peace settle in his heart. It had taken him 60 years to fully understand, but he finally knew what life's true treasure was. It wasn't the jewels they sold in his store, nor the money he had accumulated, nor the professional success he had so desperately chased. The true treasure was moments like this, a home full of love, a reunited family, the certainty that there were people in the world who genuinely cared for each other. It was Marina's drawings on the fridge, Clara's paintings on the walls, the laughter that echoed through the hallways, the dinners where they talked about everything and nothing. It was the second chances that life sometimes granted to those willing to swallow their pride, open their hearts, and accept that love was, after all, the only force capable of healing any wound and reuniting any family. From Marina's room came the soft sound of a song she had invented and hummed in her sleep. A melody about families that get lost and found, about grandparents and grandchildren, about love that never truly dies. Armando closed his eyes, smiling, knowing that Helen was finally at peace, knowing that his family was finally complete, and knowing that the future, for the first time in decades, shone with the promise of many shared joys. The locket on the table caught a ray of moonlight entering through the window, making the gold shimmer softly in the darkness. And in that golden glow, a very attentive person might have sworn they saw the reflection of a woman smiling, finally satisfied to see that her greatest work of art, a family united by love, was, at last, complete and protected forever.